People have argued over decades whether the wood of a guitar actually changes the sound. So I decided to try something a little extreme. I recorded this guitar, then completely rebuilt the body from different wood while keeping the exact same hardware, pickups and electronics. Then I recorded the exact same samples again to see if something changed. Before taking the guitar apart, I measured everything I could, including pickup height and setup, so I could match it as closely as possible afterwards. For the recording, I also tried to keep the conditions identical. I recorded clean DI signals, then reamped them through the same amp, cabinet and microphone setup. For the unplugged recordings, I even used the laser positioning system of the Aston microphone to keep the mic placement consistent. I also recorded multiple takes of each sound sample and chose the closest matching performances. Since I was mostly mixing during that time period and didn't use the recording room, I could leave the whole camera and audio setup exactly as it was. And yes, for consistency, I even wore the same clothes again. Before plugging in the guitars, let's check some obvious physical differences. The rebuilt guitar ended up noticeably heavier, and while listening to the guitars purely acoustically, I wasn't sure what to expect already. One thing that stood out immediately was how different the wood sounded when, for example, knocking on it. So before looking at any measurements or analysis, let's listen to what the guitars sound unplugged. First, here's the original guitar unplugged. And here's the rebuilt version. But of course, the real question is what happens once the guitars are plugged in? For these comparisons, I intentionally kept the examples very simple. The goal here was not to play something impressive, but to keep the performance as consistent and repeatable as possible. So I recorded to a click track, made multiple takes, and chose the performances that matches the closest. Now let's listen and compare. After listening to the recordings, I wanted to see how close the two guitars were from a more technical perspective. So I started comparing some recordings in a little bit more detail. First, I looked at the harmonic structure of the chords in Melodyne. And while there are some small differences, the overall harmonic structure is surprisingly similar. I also compared the sustain of two chords that started at the exact same level. After around 15 seconds of sustain, the volume difference was only about 0.1 dB. Then I zoomed in on the waveform of some single notes to compare the attack and transient response. And at this level of zoom, you can start to see some small differences. But honestly, at some point I genuinely thought I had loaded the same file twice because they were looking so identical. There were some small differences, but so subtle that I wonder if the performance itself is not much more significant than the guitar itself. I think one reason why this discussion is so difficult is that in real life you hardly ever get the chance to really only isolate the wood. Usually when people compare guitars, there are many more differences than just the wood of the body. It's the hardware, the setup, the strings, the pickups, and sometimes even just the player. But in this experiment I tried to keep everything very consistent, so only the wood changed and everything else stayed as same as possible. So does the wood in an electric guitar matter? After hearing these examples and seeing the measurements, I'm genuinely curious to see what you think. If you enjoy this kind of experiments and also want to learn more about real-life music production, feel free to subscribe. See you in another video. Bye bye, take care.